Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove and I'm joined by a man who's ready to answer all your questions. His name is Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello, and 6 of them. But yeah,
Six
all of them. Why not?
I mean, all of the ones that are on this printout that we've got here, right?
Indeed. I just don't want, I don't want this to seem like it's going to be infinity-length podcast, that's all.
Well, we have done some rather long podcasts lately, right? So we're planning this is going to be a little shorter.
That's the plan.
A little shorter than the recent 90-minute, I guess, soccer-length podcast. You ready for the first question?
Sure.
All right, I'm going to ask you. This one is a doozy. Mm-hmm. It's from Robert Robertson. Mm-hmm. Robert wants to know, how would the US men's national team fare if they played in the Premier League? Assume you can get the very best American players available and they had no club obligations. Mm-hmm. So essentially, Team USA in the Premier League.
Yep.
How would they do, Taylor?
I have a that's good, that's bad answer to this. Okay. The bad answer would be, I think they would be relegated. I'm pretty confident they would be. But I think if this were to actually happen, I think that team might get relegated, but I think they'd also make at least the quarterfinals of the World Cup.
What, because it would be good for them?
Yes, because you spend that much time playing together and getting used to each other and learning patterns of play. We've talked about it before. National teams can't play really complicated systems or they can't play them well because they haven't had time to work on them. If you have an entire season to work on them, then you play a World Cup, I feel like you're going to be good to go.
Do you not think they'd just be so demoralized?
Well, that too.
But repetition is good.
Or they finish like 17th and they battle their way through, and thus they have that battling mentality heading into the World Cup.
Interesting.
Either way, I think they're battling relegation.
So my answer is, I'm not going to say they'd definitely be relegated, but when you look at the lineup, they would at the very best be fighting relegation. Yep. They'd have eyes firmly fixed on 17th place.
Yes,
right?
100%.
I think we should fully answer the question, why do we think that is? Because to play staying up advocate, Christian Pulisic, Weston McKennie, these are Premier League quality players.
Mm-hmm. You want to keep listing?
I'd like to.
There we go. Yeah. That is part of it, is that I think it's not to say that there's like this complete dearth of talent, but I think that right now the U.S. soccer as a whole, and especially the men's national team, the senior national team, is in a state of transition. Yeah. And you've got players who I think a year or two ago, I would have said, they could make a Premier League roster and they would maybe start and they would maybe be very good for their teams. Players
like a Michael Bradley.
Like a Michael Bradley. Yeah. I don't know if he's still at that level. I love Michael Bradley. I don't know if he could do that. And then, to your point, you've got players like McKennie, like Pulisic, but you've got a lot of players who are on the verge. Maybe in a couple years, they could make that move and be very good for a Premier League club. But I don't know if we've got enough players there right now.
I think a good way to look at this is maybe if you look at who our starting centre-backs are right now, if you really think that we've moved on from the Omar Gonzalez, Matt Beasley generation, our starting centre-backs seem to be, say, Matt Miazga
and
Cameron Carter-Vickers.
Exactly, that's the thing.
Both of them are loaned out or not selected for their Premier League teams, right? Yep. Matt Miazga's with Chelsea, loaned to Nantes this year. Cameron Carter-Vickers is with Spurs, hasn't been loaned yet. We have a question on that later. But he's certainly not in Spurs starting two centre-backs, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And that tells you that the quality of those centre-backs, at least in the judgment of Premier League managers, is not quite up to let's start and succeed in the Premier League standard.
Agreed. I mean, because you've got Tim Weah. He's in there. You've got DeAndre Yedlin. Outside of that, you're looking at championship players. You're looking Bundesliga, so you also don't have that Premier League pedigree, that Premier League experience that you would need to stay competitive in a relegation scrap.
I would say, I don't want to depress our listeners too much. It's not far off, right? You could definitely look at Miazga and say, oh, maybe in a few years you'll be a Premier League player. Maybe not a Chelsea player, but maybe a Burnley player or a West Ham player. You could really genuinely see Matt Miazga starting for a team like that.
Yeah.
Anthony Robinson, Everton have loaned him to Wigan in the Championship. I could see him as a Premier League player in a couple of years. Yep. It's just that, like you said, we're in that weird transition phase, right? Like our most successful Premier League player would be Clint Dempsey, who we probably are not going to be starting again.
Probably not.
Anytime soon.
Yeah, and so final one for me on this is just that I also think if we had answered this question before we did our Premier League previews, I might be more inclined to say, they're like mid-table. But really, having read everything we've read...
I wish we could say that.
Yeah, I know. Having read everything we've read and researched these teams and knowing how much work and money, unless you're Cardiff or Huddersfield, goes into building these rosters, it would be foolish to say, I think, otherwise wise. Now, in a couple years, again, if you have Timothy Weah in a couple years as one of your maybe left wing options, that's great. Right now,
Tyler Adams might be a competitor in a couple of years, but right now he hasn't played outside of Major League Soccer.
Josh Sargent, the same. So you've got lots of Keaton Park's the big one. So you've got lots of promising players on the verge. Not there yet. No.
Yeah. Maybe what I'd like then is for Team USA, the current version with all those young guys, maybe should spend a year in the championship and get promoted. That would be maybe the best progression for the US national team, and then we can go up and compete.
I kind of don't think you're wrong. Yeah. And the final
there's
one.
No shame in that, right? Premier League standard is so high. This is true of most national teams.
That's a key point.
England would finish mid-table in the Premier League.
Maybe. It depends on who's managing. Is it Gary Southgate or is it Roy Hodgson?
Southgate.
I don't know. But the only other thing I wanted to say, I meant to say this earlier, is also it's worth noting right now I have a question mark at goalkeeper. You probably don't want a question mark at goalkeeper heading into a Premier League season. It's probably Zach Steffen. You and I have talked about that, but then you look at the bids that came in for him or the one bid that publicly came in for him.
Bristol City.
Again, it's not at that Premier League level yet. Maybe he could be, but not yet.
All right, I do want us to move quickly, but I can't resist this final question because this is an interesting topic, right? I'm really glad that Robert asked it. All right, imagine the season with Team USA. Imagine they either get relegated or come very close to being relegated. Which players get picked up by other teams? Because there's always the big teams pick over the smaller teams and grab their best players.
I think Christian Pulisic gets sold in January for a decent amount of money. That's one. I think Weston McKennie certainly does.
To the newly minted Canadian national team that's in there.
Yes.
The big spending Canadian team.
I think Weston McKennie certainly does.
Yeah.
Tyler Adams as a creative up-and-comer. And maybe Timothy Weah, maybe, but it's probably one of those moves to another promoted team where you're but he's still not going to get the minutes you want and he's still not going to get the consistent style of play you want.
And head coach Landon Donovan would get all the Eddie Howe style plaudits.
Yes.
Are you ready for the next question?
Sure.
Next question comes from John Youngblood. John wants to know, what are the ways in which a foreigner, in this case American, can score tickets to a Premier League match? My girlfriend and I are planning a trip to England and want to catch a Spurs match. Is there any way around specific membership and season ticket costs since we're stateside?
Okay, here's what you do. You find a sketchy-looking dude. You say, I need tickets and I'm willing to pay too much money. You go into an alleyway.
I'm not from around here. I don't know how the money works.
Exactly. You give him a wad of money. You don't know what it means.
You say take whatever's right.
You get 2 pieces of paper that say definitely tickets. You go right up to the turnstile. You're in. No problem. And of course, walk into any gate you want because they're all lead you to your seats. No problem.
I feel like for legal reasons, we should make very clear that Taylor's tongue was in his cheek. He is very much not serious.
Is that not how it works?
It is. What you just described, I'm sure you know this. I bet most people don't know this. What you just described is super illegal in England. It is. There's an act of law that makes it very illegal to sell tickets unofficially in the United Kingdom. So you cannot. I think actually as the buyer, you're probably okay. The seller is totally breaking the law, could get arrested.
I was trying to make a thanks a lot somebody joke, and I was running through who I would put responsibility for.
Successive British governments, but also mostly touts.
But I couldn't really decide who would be responsible for that one, so in the end I was just going to go with thanks a lot, Mr. Bean. That's the one that I felt like he's probably at fault.
He did start it all.
I'm saying he probably did buy scalpers tickets, maybe created some sort of chaos, and thus there was the Mr. Bean law.
It was the 1991 FA Cup final.
There we go.
He was selling tickets for that. Okay, here's... So I've asked around, I've asked on the internet, I've looked into this for John.
I think we've already answered this, right?
No, we have not. Okay. We absolutely have not. So John says, is there any way around specific membership costs?
Yeah.
There may be, but I actually think it's your best bet. Your best bet is to join, I think it's called One Hotspur. This is very Tottenham specific. I think it's £42 and it lasts for a season or a few months. And that gives you access to tickets earlier than the general public. It also gives you access to an official resale thing where season ticket holders, they've got a season ticket, they're going to a game, they can't make the game, that is then resold through the One Hotspur system. So you get access to tickets that other people don't get access to. So that probably is, much as it might be annoying to have to pay for something that's not a ticket for a membership, it's probably the best way to do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess on the one hand, it's good because then you're in that group of people. So it's not just you showing up and then being like, who's this guy?
Yep.
They know at least you've had to pay that money. It's also worth noting that you and I talked to several people on tour who had been to Premier League grounds, Premier League stadiums, and that was the way they did it. So,
Yeah.
and it was some, forgive me, I forget the individual who was telling me the story, but it was like to the extent that I think he had applied for tickets to a Manchester United FA Cup game, and was told like, oh no, there's none available. And then while he was in England, like a day before the game, he got a phone call of like, hey, there's actually still tickets available
because he was a member.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, but we're not here just to push the membership, even though we actually think it's the best option. One thing that's worth noting is Spurs are in a very actually unique situation right now. Right now, they are playing their home games at Wembley. Wembley is so big that it's not always full. So, John or any other Spurs fans, if you were to go to see a Spurs home game before they move into Total Soccer Show Stadium, we're going to sponsor it.
Yep. We've already got a tower. May
In
as well
the
sponsor
nearest
stadium.
future, it's actually quite easy to just go to the Spurs website, buy a ticket to see them at Wembley, just because Wembley's so big.
Yep.
So right now is your best bet.
Yep.
Also, some news today. I haven't fully read this, but the proposed September 15th first home match at the new stadium has been pushed back for safety concerns.
Yeah.
I believe the safety concerns are that they saw Liverpool with Naby Keita, and they thought that's not a good first game.
It's not the way we want to start this.
Can we play Cardiff City instead?
Yeah. You never want to be the this player scored the first goal in like the new stadium in a 4-1 loss.
Yeah, right. So the Wembley window has been extended.
Yeah.
That's still an opportunity. There's another way, and it depends on your financial situation. It's to go premium tickets. So if you go to the Spurs website, click on tickets, there'll be a thing for official sellers, and then there'll be companies like Thomas Cook. Have you heard of them? They're a travel company. Okay, so they will sell packages for about £300, which includes your hotel and a ticket. So £300 is about nearly $400. So it's very expensive, but you get sort of a nice ticket and you get a hotel. So if you're willing to spend some money, you can guarantee yourself a ticket in that way. Excuse me, that's my alarm going.
There you go. Plus, in a few years, money will be meaningless, so it won't even matter. So you may as well spend it now.
Bitcoin!
Yeah.
One final...
Oh, I meant a slightly more nihilistic approach to, everything will collapse in a few years, so whatever. Yeah, it's fine.
Right.
Go see him now.
Well, that's on our other podcast, right?
Yeah.
Post-civilization soccer show. So the other way is to go and visit the Reddit page, COYS, Come On You Spurs. Here, do not go on Come On You Spurs, the Reddit page, and don't post, can anyone tell me how to get a ticket?
Do not go and don't post?
So go to it,
okay.
Look around, but don't post something asking how do I get tickets, because they have a column on the right-hand side, scroll all the way down, and they literally have a window that says... days without a ticket request, 0. Because somebody posts it every day. So don't be the person that adds to that pile, but click on the former requests for how do I get tickets. Then you've got other mostly helpful Spurs fans letting you know how to get tickets.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right.
I've got one final one before we move on. I'm really just trying to get all the information out there. I know you want to move on. But there's also your local Spurs supporters group. So on the Spurs official webpage, you can click on supporters groups and it will show you North America, and it will show you a really long list. Like there's one in Richmond. There's probably one in the city near where you live, John. Reach out to them and just ask if they have any connection to Spurs, because they may be able to say, hey, yeah, they send us, or we have secured 3 tickets for every game. It's worth a try to see if you can get it through your local Spurs supporters group. That's all the information.
All right.
Put it all out there.
Lots of information there, but another question to get to.
Yeah. Could you ask the next question while I take a breath?
Sure, but then you're going to be talking a lot again. Randolph Scully asks, what, if anything, do you think the USMNT should be prioritizing over the next couple of years beyond just getting ready for the next round of World Cup qualifying? How much do actual results in competitions like the Gold Cup matter as opposed to longer-term development goals right now?
Ooh, okay. So I think what we should be prioritizing in the very short term is finding a head coach.
Yeah. I mean, that's obviously the priority.
That's obviously 100%. The priority. Let's say after we get a head coach, whomever that may be, I think the priority would be to almost combine the two things that Randolph mentioned. You build a core of younger players like Timothy Weah, Tyler Adams, Weston McKennie, Matt Miazga, all those guys, and give them reps together, mold them into a team, and compete for things like the Gold Cup.
So I'm kind of conflicted on that, because that was my first thought. But then I feel like, how often do we hear about a manager who comes in, a new national team manager comes in, has a couple games that is like, okay, this is my core, and just excludes people. And then I feel like once you've excluded people, it becomes that much harder, because you sort of like you get dug into your belief, and then suddenly these 10 players who should be in consideration no longer are.
Well, here's the line I'm drawing, and I mean this with all due respect to these players. I mean, like, what I would want is the new coach to not be like, okay, I want to win the 2019 Gold Cup. I need Omar Gonzalez and Graham Zusi and the guys who've been there and done that before, right? I want a guy who's going to say, all right, I want to win the Gold Cup. I want to do it with Eric Palmer-Brown, Cameron Carter-Vickers, maybe Shaq Moore, Anthony Robinson. I want the younger core of the team. And I understand the core could be 30 players as opposed to a specific 23 or 11. But it's more about just moving on to that next generation and trying to win things with that generation with the odd Michael Bradley sprinkled in.
See, I don't think I agree with you. Because I think that's what you would probably do as like a national team coach, because you have all of that like experience of talking about them for so long. I don't know if we can realistically expect a coach to come in and say, these are the 11 players that I want to build around. I definitely want these guys. I don't want these.
I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I'm saying I just want the next coach to start building with a younger group as opposed to calling in an experienced group to try and win the Gold Cup. So the specific examples I'm giving are, don't call in Omar Gonzalez, Matt Beasler. Call in the younger centre-backs, whoever they may be, but make them your centre-backs that you're thinking of using for the long term.
Okay.
Yeah?
I guess I see where you're coming from. I still think I don't know if that's the wisest approach, just because once you start saying, not that they're ever going to say, like, I'm not calling in Omar Gonzalez, but once you make it clear you're only looking in this direction, you do exclude other people. And I think the bigger thing for me is more so when they hire that coach, you have an idea, then you have an insight into what the approach is going to be from a tactical standpoint and from their style of play and their philosophy. And I think that then gives you a better indication of what they're going to be trying to do with those types of tournaments like the Gold Cup with friendlies. My bigger thing is my priority, I think, for the U.S. national team, men's national team that is, should be like reinstilling enthusiasm in the team. Like as much as...
I would say the young kids have that right now under Dave Sarachan.
And I think that's where I hope it continues. I'm with you that I would like to see the young kids, but I think the biggest thing about that is that it's mostly because they're younger. They're not as like media savvy. They haven't had all of the training about how you have to be stoic and give like monotone answers.
May they never receive that training.
I know.
I want to see Weston McKennie annoying people for the next 15 years.
Because it makes you enjoy watching the team. It makes you want to get back into like celebrating the team, as opposed to in the past. It is kind of the same players. It's the same approach to the media. It's $140 tickets or whatever. And I think that should be a priority, if not for the men's team, then for just U.S. soccer as a whole, is sort of reinvigorating the fan base. Because if you're just sort of expecting fans to continue to follow a team without giving them a reason to do so, then you're expecting things and not earning those things.
Okay, so I'm with you on this. I think some of that is a US soccer focus. They need to think about what is it worth us making money on these ticket prices versus is it worth us trying to reach out to fans and do something for them, like cheaper ticket prices. In terms of what the team and the new coach and all that could do, maybe one thing we seem to agree on is that they should think about having a defined style. Like as opposed to, okay, so we disagree on maybe what type of personnel and what the age gap should be, right? But maybe what the new coach should do is say, and not in a vague way like Klinsmann did, in a specific way, we are playing a counter-attacking style or we are playing a possession style, and actually have an identifiable, this is what the US men's national team does under this coach kind of thing. Sort of like, I got really excited about England under Southgate because he at least said, I want to play the ball out the back. I'm going to play a back three. Like you have at least 2 or 3 things that you can really nail down, and anyone, either like really like deep tactical watchers like you and I like to think we are, or someone who's just casually watching in a bar, everybody knows, these are the 3 things that I know the US team is going to be doing successfully or unsuccessfully. They're going to be trying to do that.
Yeah, and I think that connects with what I was trying to say, maybe albeit poorly, is that like when you base your selection process on specific traits and skills, that to me is a far more like bulletproof way of building a roster, because you look at Gareth Southgate, for example, it's very telling to me that there wasn't any sort of, or any kind of sustained negative reaction to not choosing Chris Smalling. Because he had said...
And because he explained why.
Because but even just saying, like not even specifically to Chris Smalling, but he had said, I need center backs who can play out of the back, who can play with the ball at their feet. Once you establish that, you kind of either rule people out or you make them change their game. That's the difference for me. And I'm not saying this is what you were saying, but like we hear so many people say like no one over 30 should ever be called in. Nobody
I think that's silly. I think it's a case by case basis.
Nobody who played under Arena or whatever, and it's just sort of like nobody who played under Arena except for Christian Pulisic. Like that's what we hear. We genuinely hear stuff like that. And to me it's like then you're creating these sort of unnecessary obstacles and barriers, you also open yourself up for an ageism lawsuit. But
lawsuit?
I mean, you never know. But then to basically make it based on the way I want to play, it tells players, oh, I need to improve this. I need to work on this. I got to get better at this if I want to be included.
You show it for camp and you know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Right? You know, if say if the new coach says, we're going to play the ball out the back, you know it's not going to be a bunch of driven long balls aiming for Alan Gordon's head.
Yep.
Right?
And you also then...
All respect to Alan Gordon, by the way. I just thought of a target man. That's the first one.
Pretty sure I saw him throw an elbow into the face of somebody this weekend. So slightly less respect.
He's a warrior.
That's the proper Englishness in you. Yeah. So I think that's the approach I would like to take. And then when you show up to training camp and the coach says, like, never mind, we're doing this, that's when you have your dramatic moment in the ensuing documentary about how everything fell apart. Because like, oh, wait a minute, suddenly things are changing and it wasn't good.
Oh, one final thing I'd like to say. Compare the Gareth Southgate, Chris Smalling, we're not selecting him because we want defenders who can pass out of the back, versus Jurgen Klinsmann's explanations about where players were in the pecking order. And he would just say things like, others are ahead of him.
Yep.
And then zero ever explanation as to why.
Yeah.
So I would love for that to be communicated. If US Soccer Communications Department is listening, I think that should be one of the keys for the next coach, is to communicate to media and then therefore to fans what the team is trying to do.
Yeah, and so I think, like, again, to bring it all home, if you define that style early and you make it clear what you're trying to play or what system you're trying to play, then you give kind of clear foundation for then defending your decisions later on.
There we go. Thank you for bringing it on home.
I try.
We have 3 more listener questions that I'm excited to get to, but we also have an advertiser that I'm excited to talk about. It's The Athletic, the best soccer writing on the whole internet.
Oh, yeah?
I mean, I've looked at all of it, and yes.
All right.
All respect to every other place, but The Athletic is collecting an all-star collection of soccer writers.
It is indeed, including Adam Snavely.
Yes.
We love Adam Snavely. We love his panic rankings.
Yep.
He wrote them for the World Cup. He is going to continue writing them for the Premier League. They're very good.
His first Premier League panic rankings came out this week.
Yep.
We can't spoil too many of them, right?
I can tell you my two of my favorite lines.
I was hoping you would. Yeah. I'll do the same for you.
We are the cherries, the most fearsome of adorable fruits. We can never die. Or we cannot die. That's a great one. And this one, I think it's not like we started off the season against the single-season Premier League goals record holder and his marauding band of technical wizards or anything like that. I think that was West Ham's panic ranking.
My favourite was I expected to see Cardiff near the top of the panic rankings, but instead they were quite low in the panic rankings with the simple explanation, we got to the Premier League with Neil Warnock. What did you think we expected?
Yeah.
And there was also a little brief one for João Moutinho, the Portuguese World Cup midfielder who recently joined Wolves. Wolves were quite high in the panic rankings, they're like mid-table in the panic rankings.
This is always confusing when we do this because I get what you mean, but they were like near the bottom, like they were near like number 1.
Yeah,
but to say then they're high in the panic rankings, it's weird to go the opposite way.
When it goes 20-1.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So the Wolves panic ranking was João Moutinho looking at the Wolverhampton sky, realising the 2 weather patterns are rain and more rain. Which is very true for this past weekend.
Oh,
yeah.
Poor João Moutinho.
So I love that Adam Snavely is writing for The Athletic. Also there, Steph Yang. Do you remember Steph Yang? Been on the show many, many times. She's been writing some US women's national team stuff. There's a great story basically explaining where the US women's national team is right now, about less than a year away from the Women's World Cup, and just talking about that the good generational shift that has happened. For example, not to give too much away, but like Carly Lloyd is now a sub, right? Carly Lloyd is not demanding to start every game. There's been a bit of a transition to a new generation and something of a settled team. Right. So we can panic about the U20s at the U20 Women's World Cup, but it looks like we can be somewhat optimistic about this senior women's national team.
All right, and we can be optimistic about the Athletics coverage. If you would like to read more of the Athletics coverage, what can people do, Daryl?
Well, you subscribe to The Athletic, but don't pay full price. Why would you pay full price when you can get 40% off?
That's a good question.
And we get the credit for sending you there if you go to theathletic.com/TSS August. TSS August as all one word. The link will be in the show notes. 40% off an Athletic subscription. Theathletic.com/TSS August.
All right. Thank you to The Athletic for sponsoring today's program. Now, next question from John Adams. Does the English Premier League start too early? The Bundesliga starts August 24th, La Liga the 17th, Serie A the 18th. So what do we think, Daryl? Too early for the Premier League?
No, the Premier League does not start too early. It has to start this early to get all the games in, right? Yeah. So there are 20 teams in the Premier League versus, say, 18 in the Bundesliga, and there are 2 cups that are taken seriously, the FA Cup and the EFL Cup. Essentially, there's just too much soccer to be played, so it has to start this early.
Well, they're adding a break this time, right?
Oh, no, I looked into this. It's next season, 2019-2020. Okay. They're hoping to add a break. So that's when, I think I misled you because I mentioned that the other day, right?
Okay, yeah.
This year, there's no winter break just yet, as I understand it.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's just no other way they could do it. The only way to get fewer games in would be to allow Premier League teams to opt out of the EFL Cup, which would be a disaster for that tournament.
Yep.
Would be to reduce the Premier League from 20 to 18 teams. But then, like, the bottom 10, that would be like turkeys voting for Christmas, right? So no one's going to want to do that. So I think the Premier League has to start this early to make it happen.
But the League Cup games or EFL Cup games, those are midweek, right?
Yeah.
So that doesn't necessarily factor into the length of the season.
I mean, it does because the teams are playing more games, right? And the closer you crowd all those together, it's all about fixture congestion, right?
Yeah, but aren't those going to be played anyway in the middle of the week?
They are, but if we start, for example, if we started the season later, if we started the Premier League season later, then some of the Premier League games would have to be played midweek. You know what I mean? Like midweek is a Premier League scheduling option. That's why we sometimes get Tuesday and Wednesday Premier League games.
Yeah.
So that's why the EFL Cup is just part of the schedule that has to be accounted for when you put the Premier League fixtures together. Yeah.
Because I kind of disagree with you. I think it does start about a week too early. But for me it doesn't because I'm happy to watch soccer this early. But I just think with how unsettled so many of the teams looked and how much they were still figuring things out, it wasn't a great look at times. That said, I don't have faith in Premier League clubs, specifically their owners, specifically the owners with dollars in their eyes, to use that week effectively. It feels like it would have been another week of touring the Far East or North America and not necessarily getting in quality preseason.
Exactly. I think the other thing is it feels particularly acute, is that the right word, this year because of the World Cup.
Yeah.
The World Cup finished, less than a month ago? Yep. And so normally it doesn't feel so weird because normally there's a whole summer of not seeing, say, Harry Kane in action. So August 10th, 11th doesn't feel that soon, right? Because you haven't seen Harry Kane scoring goals for months. This time, because he was doing it about a month ago, it all just feels like it's on top of each other and everything's happening at once.
And a lot of them didn't have a preseason as a result.
Yes,
that's
exactly,
the other big part of it, is all the stories about, these 6 players just returned to training and now they're starting. Makes it feel a little bit premature.
So what's our answer here? Are we going to come to a consensus answer? I mean, we agree it feels earlier because of the World Cup.
I think it like emotionally starts too early, but I think you're right. There's probably not much to be done with it short of removing competitions or removing teams and shortening the season.
All right. So best of luck to the Premier League.
Yeah.
I'm sure they're doing just fine financially though. Next question comes from Todd Brannan. Todd wants to know, how does the closing of the transfer window, because the English transfer window, Premier League window closed before the first game, relate to loan moves in the Premier League? Specifically, does the fact that Cameron Carter-Vickers was not loaned out mean that he is with Tottenham at least until the January transfer window opens, or is there still a chance he can go out on loan?
There is still a chance.
There is still a chance. Why is there still a chance, Taylor?
Because
like Lloyd Christmas, you're telling me there's a chance.
Because topical Dumb and Dumber references, but that's what we're all about. Because
everybody's seen it.
It's because your transfer window is closed doesn't mean anybody else's is. So that's why you have, say, in the middle of the season, players moving to China because their transfer window functions differently than the Premier League transfer window. So even though Premier League clubs can't bring in players, they can still sell players and let players go out on loan.
And the places that CCV could go, and we're invested in this as US men's national team fans, right? The Ligue 1 transfer window, the La Liga transfer window, the Bundesliga transfer window, all still open. Serie A is open until August 17th. Germany, Spain, and France open until August 31st. So until the end of the month, Cameron Carter-Vickers could go to any of those countries. He could also go on loan to a championship team till August 31st.
There you go.
Do you know that? So championship teams can't sign players permanently anymore. Their transfer window is closed. But their loan transfer window is open until August 31st. And given CCV's history of where he's gone on loan, if he does go, that seems the most likely destination, right?
I guess so. Except it still just seems foolish to me that the Premier League window is closed. And I know they voted on it. I know it's a decision that's been made. But it's part of the reason why I don't think he will go on loan, because you can't risk it. If you're a Premier League team and suddenly maybe Alderweireld looks like it's not going to get sorted, maybe you...
Oh, he's one that could end up in La Liga or Bundesliga, right?
Potentially,
in the next few weeks,
So then CCV stays. But maybe, like, I'm not saying this happened, but if you're a team who, just for sake of example, say somebody on Tottenham did really struggle, one of the center backs looked bad, Jan Vertonghen seemed like, oh, maybe he's past it.
Yeah. He only got that ball 8 millimeters over the line.
Yeah. Then maybe you're thinking like, maybe, like, I'm just saying, like, say he had a terrible game.
Yeah.
Like, then if you're Pochettino, do you loan out that young player, or knowing that you can't reinforce, you can't bring anybody else, do you keep that young player just in case? That's why I think it wasn't the smartest decision.
I would say you can do like a callback option, right? So they could send CCV to Derby County, and they could insert a clause that's like, if we need him, he comes back.
Yeah,
right.
But either way, you're still loaning out and then calling back the same player who maybe isn't quite at that level yet, and then you've added a lot of turbulence. You've sent them away, you've brought them back, or you haven't sent them away, but then you send them in January. It just feels like it wasn't. It feels like a lot of these decisions were rushed because of the situations we've already discussed.
All right. Let's focus on CCV, though. Would you like him to go on loan, or would you like to see him fight for minutes at Tottenham and probably not get many? Would it be worth one Premier League start versus 10 Championship
I think
starts?
a big part of it depends on what happens with Toby Alderweireld.
Okay.
Without him there, suddenly it probably is Jan Vertonghen and Davinson Sanchez as your two starting center backs, and then that feels like maybe there are more opportunities for CCV, even if like Eric Dyer is somehow becoming a center back.
Do you know what? That might be what they're doing as well, right? Maybe they're thinking, all right, we'll loan CCV to a Championship team if Alderweireld is staying.
Yep.
If Alderweireld gets sold, we hold on to Cameron Carter-Vickers basically because we might need him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my answer. I think there's a chance Alderweireld stays, but maybe they still have to solve that issue. So we'll see how that goes for them as well.
All right, I think we answered the CCV question.
I hope so.
Ready for today's final question, which comes from Joe Martella. Joe wants to know, are some clubs, quote, too big to fail, unquote? Or could a huge club like a Man United, Man City, Arsenal, Chelsea, whatever, go down eventually? Basically, do you think they could progressively get worse and worse, have worse and worse seasons until they eventually drop out of the Premier League? Or is there just too much money and they'll always be able to bring in new talent because of their name and their resources?
I mean, absolutes are absolutes, so always is a word. I think that I'm curious to hear your thoughts, because I can't tell if this is bias. I think that barring some sort of like financial collapse that makes it very unlikely for massive owners to continue to invest money, I think for some of those teams, yes, they're too big to fail. And I think the key thing for me is that if you look at United, Arsenal, and Liverpool, how many titles have they won since 2009?
I actually don't know the answer.
They have won 0.
Yeah.
So, but those are still clubs where people want to go, they want to play, they're going to spend money because they have that allure, they have that appeal, they have that reputation.
The key is the Champions League, right?
Yeah.
I think genuinely players are more interested in just making sure they go to a team where they get to play in the Champions League versus winning a trophy all the time.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but I still think that Liverpool, Arsenal, those names have a history, and it stands out in a way that I don't know if this is going to be controversial, but like I don't know if Man City does. Yes, Man City have an incredibly long history, but they don't have that same history of competing like, you know, at the top level for decades and decades.
I don't think they have trouble recruiting players right now, though.
That's not my point. Yeah. My point is simply that, like, do you have the staying power if things go bad? If 10 years from now they start to struggle, I don't know if those fans who became Man City fans 5 years ago...
What are we talking about here? Are we talking about Man City with their current resources, but maybe they have like a bad coach that they won't fire and they've made some bad signings and the team just doesn't work and they keep losing games and they're looking at relegation? But they have the money. Or are we talking about Man City, say, if oil prices really dip and suddenly the ownership group has no money and Man City suddenly are in financial crisis? Because I think those are two different things.
Strangely, neither. Because what I'm looking at is like the club in an abstract of Manchester City as a club. Not necessarily their ownership, not necessarily who plays for them, but the idea of the club as its own individual entity and what could happen. And I do think that there are certain clubs that have established this reputation that even if oil were completely done away with and we didn't need it anymore, would another whoever replaced them with solar power, I don't know. The person who has all the solar power money in the world comes in. Would they buy Man City or would they buy Arsenal? I don't know the answer to that, but I think the allure of the club that has this books written about them and movies made about them, that might be the one that they opt for. So I think there are certain clubs that no matter what happens, people will still want to pay money to be involved with them.
But could that team still get relegated? Is really Joe's question, right? Like, is it impossible for a team like, say, Manchester United to get relegated?
In one season or over the course of several?
I mean, he's saying over the course of like a drop and drop and
Actually,
drop.
I think the more likely one is a one-season horror show where everything goes wrong. Maybe that's possible, but even then, it feels like they still have the quality of players that a caretaker manager can come in and sort of right the ship long enough.
I think it seems to me that even though nothing is impossible, right? Manchester United could get relegated next season, because anything is possible. In the same way that Leicester... The season before Leicester won the Premier League, no one said it could really happen, but it did, right? So if Leicester can win the Premier League, Man United or Liverpool can get relegated.
Really?
Right? I mean, yeah, of course, it's possible, is what I'm saying. Anything is possible. It's just not likely because the standard of players is too high. If they maintain their current financial situation, any ownership group would recognise that staying in the Premier League is tantamount. There is no way they would hold back resources in trying to fix things and make it happen.
Yeah.
I think there's enough of a gap in quality between the bottom end of the Premier League table and the big teams that they could always outspend and out-resource and make sure to overcome those lower teams and finish like 15th in the worst possible season.
Yeah, I think so.
I think you hinted at it at the top of the show, but the only way I could see this happening, a big name team going down, is an actual financial crisis where they have to sell off all their best players and they're left with a shell of a team, right? So solar power might be the only thing that can make this happen.
And I think maybe that's why I jumped to the end of that thinking to begin.
I think you missed phase 2 out.
No, I mean, I think what I'm trying to say here is that if that happened, I still think there are clubs that even if they stripped all their assets and had to sell, some gazillionaire is going to come in and say, I want to own Man United, I want to own Arsenal.
Oh, I thought you were talking about players signing for the team and reputation. You were saying if there was a financial crisis at, say, Arsenal, Man United, someone would step in and solve it.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Whereas, I don't know, Man City have obviously this track record in the last decade or so of having all this money, having these incredibly exciting players, but I don't know if they have the consistent long-term branding. Our friend Thad is probably slamming his iPhone right now. But that consistent longevity that if you come in, if they collapse, do you buy them or do you buy Arsenal?
Well, it also depends on the specific financial situation, right? Like people could love Arsenal, but if and this is an imaginary thing, but if the owners had done a thing that means that Arsenal are like billions of pounds in debt and taking on that team meant you would have to assume billions of pounds of debt, maybe no matter how much you love Arsenal and the history of Arsenal, it might just be a bad business decision for someone. So or you could have an owner that refuses to sell despite running the club into the ground. Yeah. So that's possible too. But I think what we're both driving at is it's very unlikely that this happens to any big team.
Yep. Because, I mean, I again, same thing. I go back to the Yankees. I believe they've won one title since the turn of the century, and they are still the New York Yankees. They're still one of the most profitable, well-known, well-branded teams in the world.
This is a baseball team?
Correct. There you go.
All right. That was 6 questions. Thank you to Robert, John, Randolph, John, again, Todd, and Joe for today's questions. If you'd like to ask us a question, please go to totalsoccershow.com/questions. There's a form you fill out. Leave your question there. If you are a TSS subscriber, $10 a month or more, we guarantee to answer one of your questions per month. If you are a $10 subscriber and you've asked us a question and we haven't answered it, please remind us. Email contact@totalsoccershow.com. Let us know that we didn't answer your question because a lot of questions come in. There's a chance that we missed them. Probably didn't because we're pretty good, but there's a chance that we missed them.
There is a chance. And then, as you said, once you join, if you choose to support the show, you can also join the Scouting Network.
Yep, totalsoccershow.com/join.
We've got many scouting reports to get to. Shall we get to them?
Oh, yeah. I see some exciting names on today's list, though. Can I get us started?
Sure.
I'm excited for the first one. First report comes from James Jones, and it's about Andrew Carlton, the 18-year-old American attacker for Atlanta United. Andrew was named man of the match for both the MLS Homegrown and homegrown, and the Atlanta United 2 game against Ottawa. While both games would end in a draw, Andrew provided attacking flair and was able to link up for several key chances in both games. Yeah, I watched him in the homegrown game.
Well done, Mr. Carlton. Richie Garcia scouting Emerson Hyndman, 22-year-old American midfielder for Hibernian on loan from AFC Bournemouth.
Come on, you Hibs!
Hibs transferred star midfielder John McGinn to Aston Villa this summer, so the speculation is that Hyndman has been signed with an eye towards replacing him, or loaned with an eye towards replacing him.
Yep.
Emerson got a few minutes in Hibs' 0-0 draw with Molde in the Europa League playoff, which took place only about 24 hours after he had signed. He then started the next game for Hibernian and played 62 minutes in a 1-1 draw against St. Johnston. He didn't look rusty, played the ball well in tight spaces, made good passes, and wasn't afraid to dribble in those tight spaces.
That sounds very Emerson Hyndman.
Yep.
Tristan Gilliand Kunkel scouting Derek Jones, the 21-year-old American midfielder for the Philadelphia Union. Tristan says Derek Jones started his first game for the Union in over a year, playing 66 minutes in a 3-0 loss to the Portland Timbers. Jones was solid, but not spectacular in the midfield. That sounds very Derek Jones. Philly coach Jim Curtin has been straightforward about Jones, saying he's roughly 5th on the depth chart at his position, and will continue to bounce between starting for the Steel and the Union bench.
That sounds very Jim Curtin.
Just a reminder that Derek Jones made the U20 World Cup roster in 2017 ahead of Jonathan Gonzalez.
Ish. Ryan Marzak scouting Josh Onoma, the 21-year-old English midfielder for Tottenham. I'm waiting for it. You're not going to say it?
English Modric.
There we go. After a season on loan at Aston Villa, it looks like Mauricio Pochettino may be giving Josh Onoma one last chance to make it at Tottenham. A few teams have been reported to be interested in a loan deal for the youngster, but Pochettino has thus far kept the youngster in London for now.
Maybe a similar CCV situation, right, where they're waiting to see what happens. I also know there's a bit of an injury crisis in Spurs midfield.
Yep.
Sissoko started this weekend.
Yes.
So maybe Josh Onoma sticking around till people get healthy. John Youngblood, who asked the question earlier today, is scouting Tashan, we think, Oakley Booth. John has a call out to see how to pronounce
Does he?
Oakley Booth's first name, yeah.
It's between Tashan and Tayshawn.
Yes. And not what I just said, which was somewhere in the middle. Oakley Booth.
Tashan?
Oakley Booth, how dare you, is an 18-year-old English midfielder for Tottenham. John says Oakley Booth picked up an injury just before Spurs departed for the US for pre-season and missed every single ICC match.
So did I.
Instead, fellow TSS Scouting Network player Oliver Skip started every match and was impressive. TOB, as John calls him, will now most likely feature for the U23 team this campaign.
Robert Newman scouting Mason Mount, 19-year-old English midfielder on loan at Derby from Chelsea. If I had an enthusiasm meter or a height meter for Mason Mount, as reported by Robert Newman, like if it was at a 10, we're at a 15 right now.
Wait, what's
happened?
happened?
Sure. Mount got the start in Derby's first championship match on the road at Reading, wearing the number 8 shirt just like his manager/idol, Frank Lampard. Mount scored the first goal in Derby's dramatic 2-1 comeback victory. While it's obviously still very early, Mount drew praise for his performance, which was described as Lampard-esque.
I hope it was described by Frank Lampard as Lampard-esque.
That would be even better.
That would be great. I also know, to bring your hype meter down a little bit, that in the next game, Derby got murdered by Bielsa's Leeds.
Oh, it's not a generic hype meter. It is just Robert Newman's, because his level of enthusiasm about Mason Mount specifically at Derby with Frank Lampard, every single time it just gets ratcheted
so
up.
We're at 15 right now.
And it makes me very happy.
Let's keep an eye on what happens to the hype meter going forward. Taylor Makaria is scouting Ademola Lookman, the 20-year-old English winger for Everton. Taylor says, although RB Leipzig came in with 3 different bids, Ademola Lookman will remain at Everton this season, with manager Marco Silva commenting, quote, "He is our player and he stays, period," unquote. So he didn't say period, there's just a period in the sentence. So it appears for at least the first half of the season, Ademola Lookman will be battling for a spot in the Premier League with Everton.
Zach Lippert.
I'll say Theo Walcott did not look great against Wolves, so maybe Lookman has a chance on the right wing.
Maybe. Zach Lippert scouting Izzy Brown, the 21-year-old English attacker for Chelsea. Izzy Brown is back in light training after an ACL tear back in January, but since the transfer window will close before he will be healed, he likely won't get another loan, so that likely means no first-team football until 2019.
Kevin Downs is scouting Trevor Zwetsloot, the 18-year-old New Zealand midfielder for Werder Bremen 2. Kevin says Trevor Zwetsloot moved from the Bremen U19s to Bremen 2, but his biggest move of the summer came when he committed to the New Zealand U20s instead of the Netherlands or the US. Did you hear the uncertainty in my voice starting to
I did.
read this? I kind of had a bad feeling that this is where it was going. He has an American parent.
When you assigned him, was he like a 17-year-old American playing for Werder Bremen?
Kevin had asked for a US-eligible player, and I thought Trevor would make his way to the US, not to New Zealand. He has an American parent and a Dutch parent, but also lived in New Zealand from ages 2 to 15. It's pretty formative.
Yeah.
Pretty formative. He has played in both of New Zealand's games at the Oceania U19 Championships, a 2-1 win over Tahiti and a 14-0 win over Tonga.
That'll do it.
Top two teams will advance to the U20 World Cup next year.
Could still follow the one-time switch because it's still in the youth official competitions.
Yeah, but I'm going to give Kevin an out if he wants a US-specific player and he doesn't want to follow New Zealand's progress through the Oceania Championships. Email me and maybe we can switch it up for you.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. Cole Hamilton scouting Callum Connolly, 20-year-old English midfielder on loan at Wigan from Everton. This is somewhat a carbon copy of our Anthony Robinson report with one change. Connolly signed a new 3-year deal with Everton and was then sent on loan to Wigan to join up with Anthony Robinson.
Oh, right. At least they can all hang out together.
Yeah.
All the Everton loanees. Katie Castronova is scouting Timothy Fosu-Mensah, the 20-year-old Dutch defender on loan at Fulham from Manchester United. Katie says, quote, "I have seen my scoutie in person," unquote. TFM played in United's preseason tour in America, more specifically in the 4-1 loss in Michigan against Liverpool. Was that the result? It was a bad day for everyone involved, including me, as I accidentally bought tickets in the Liverpool fan section. TFM was not entirely to blame for the ticket mix-up, as the entire United team looked sluggish on tour.
They all didn't give her good advice as to where to buy tickets.
After returning to England, loans to both Valencia and Hertha Berlin seemed imminent. However, in a deadline day dash, TFM went on a season-long loan to Fulham. Good luck to both him and full America.
Yeah. Speaking of full America, Brendan Masser scouting Marlon Fossey, the 19-year-old American right back at Fulham. Fossey is currently 4th on the depth chart at right back at Fulham. Yikes. However, a loan is unlikely as manager Slavica Jokanovic. We got to learn how to pronounce Serbian names because I feel like I always do it wrong.
Jokanovic.
There we go. Thank you.
Just say it with confidence, even if it's wrong.
Jokanovic.
Whatever you want to do.
Jokanovic. Manager Slavica Jokanovic wants to remain hands-on with his development. For example, Fossey has been training with the first team since returning last spring from a serious groin injury. It's still possible he'll be sent on loan before the August 30th EFL loan deadline. I think we talked about that.
We did.
But it's speculated that Jokanovic would rather have Fossey stick around for Premier League 2 and cup ties.
All right. 4th on the right back depth chart sounds a little low to me.
Hey, he's just 3 away from 1.
I mean, yeah, exactly. That's the problem. That is the problem.
A couple injuries, maybe some food poisoning. Joe and I need to get to London.
Well, thank you on that note.
Yeah.
Thank you to everybody who submitted scouting reports. Thank you to everybody who does not report Taylor to Interpol for his proposed international crimes. Whatever. If you would like to join...
I don't even know what Interpol does.
If you would like to join the Total Soccer Show Scouting Network, the URL is totalsoccershow.com/join. I'm going to be making scouting assignments this week. I promise I really will. I found some time to do it. Also, we announced yesterday, I want to announce it again, the Talent Spotter idea, where you can join the Scouting Network at totalsoccershow.com/join. If you don't want to scout a player, but you do want to be involved, we invite you to be a talent spotter, where we give you access to one big document. You can see who's on the list already scouted. You can see who's been suggested to scout. If you spot a talented young player and you think that they need to be in the Scouting Network, you can add their name to the list. So you'll be helping us compile a database of talented young players as a talent spotter.
Yeah.
Once again, totalsoccershow.com/join.
Because it's worth noting there was this kid playing in like a pickup game in, I think it was Los Angeles. He gets spotted by a Newcastle scout. Suddenly he ends up at Newcastle. Then he goes to Real Madrid. Then things go off the rails. And yes, that's the plot to goal.
Wasn't he featured in the Adam Snavely panic rankings for his Athletic article? Yeah, it was. I think it was for Newcastle. It may have been the panic level was Santi when he gets to Newcastle and realises he doesn't know anyone, and he calls Glenn. Is it Glenn who he calls?
I think so.
But in this reality, Glenn doesn't pick up the phone.
That's a horrifically accurate description of Newcastle.
Oh, to end on a downer, we saw the DeAndre Yedlin news this morning, right? The knee injury that we mentioned yesterday.
It's being reported, so who knows? It hasn't been confirmed yet by the club. But yeah.
But it doesn't look good. It looks like maybe 5 or 6 months out for DeAndre Yedlin with that knee injury.
That's what Sky were reporting.
Not yet confirmed, though. Okay.
No, Newcastle have not commented at all, which is very much frustrating their fans, especially because they did not strengthen, as far as I know, at right back in the window.
It's almost as if they don't have a good ownership.
Almost as if.
Yeah.
Interpol should look into that.
Yeah.
Is that what they do? I still don't know what they do.
It's not just a band.
Do they hire Americans?
It's the international police.
Here's my question. Do they hire Americans?
I don't know.
Because Ethan Hawke is hired by them in Lord of War, and it's always bothered me. So I need to know that answer. Someone needs to look that up.
I'm going to say yes. They also look very unkindly on people attacking 3 Fulham right backs because it looks like a pattern. It looks like a pattern.
Not when they're on international duty.
Taylor Rockwell, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Right back at you, buddy.
Listeners, thank you for listening. We'll be back tomorrow with yet another Total Soccer show.
And I just want to say Daryl Groh's refusal to join a Spectre-like organization that manipulates things so that American soccer players succeed is disappointing and disheartening.